My name is Becky Hazelip, mid-30s, and if you had asked me a year ago what my life looked like, I would have said it was stable, predictable, and good. Not perfect, nothing ever is, but steady in a way I thought mattered. I had a reliable job as a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm, a quiet apartment in the city, and a boyfriend I believed I was building a future with. His name was Peter, and when we first met at a rooftop barbecue through mutual friends, I remember thinking he was the kind of guy who walked into a room and immediately drew people in. He was charismatic, animated, a natural storyteller who laughed loudly and made everything feel bigger than it really was. I was the opposite, more grounded, more observant, more careful. Somehow our differences felt complementary, like we fit into each other's empty spaces. Before we met, Peter had gone through a series of setbacks. He lost his job in marketing during the pandemic, fell into a depressive slump, and got pulled into the emotional fallout of his parents' bitter divorce. I remember those days vividly because I was there for all of them. I picked up freelance work to cover rent when he was between jobs. I stayed up late to help him rebuild his resume, rehearse interview answers, and reconnect with old colleagues. When he finally landed a stable position at an ad agency, I celebrated his success like it was my own. We even managed to travel here and there, short weekends away, a trip to the coast, the kinds of memories couples collect without realizing they're bookmarking entire chapters of their lives. I covered more of our expenses because I could, and because I genuinely wanted him to feel stable after everything he'd endured. His friends folded me into their circle, and his mother treated me like a daughter, leaning on me in ways she never leaned on him. Over time, my life became intertwined with his until it felt like I was helping carry both of our worlds. But even in those moments of closeness, there were cracks. Her name was Lana Peters' ex-girlfriend. She slipped into our conversations more often than I liked. Lana and I used to go there on weekends, he'd say casually, or Lana was obsessed with that dish you remind me of her sometimes. I tried to ignore it at first. Everyone has a past, I told myself. But then there were the messages, the occasional DM he'd send her, the posts. He'd like the harmless jokes he insisted she'd appreciate because we just have history, Becky. Don't make this into something it isn't. Every time I voiced discomfort, he deflected. Relax. That's insecurity talking. Still, I put my faith in what we had. I thought loyalty meant patience. I thought being a supportive partner meant trusting him even when my instincts felt uneasy. So when his birthday came around, I wanted the evening to be special, simple, just us and a couple of close friends. I booked reservations at a beautiful Italian restaurant downtown, bought him a slate blue blazer in his favorite shade, and ordered a meaningful gift, a custom bracelet engraved with the coordinates from the Overlook where we took our first trip together. It felt personal and emotional, the kind of gift you give someone you truly believe will be part of your future. But the day of the dinner, something felt off. Peter kept checking his phone, smiling at messages he wouldn't explain, brushing off questions with vague answers. I tried to ignore the tightening in my chest. When we arrived at the restaurant, he ordered an expensive bottle of wine and tried to make small talk, but his distraction was obvious. He claimed our friends were running late because of parking issues, so we settled in to wait. Then the door opened and my heart dropped. It wasn't our friends, it was Lana walking in, confidently holding a bottle of wine like she had every right to be there. Peter stood up, instantly grinning, and announced, "Surprise, I invited Lana. You should be fine with this. We have history, and I want things to feel normal again." I froze, staring at him in disbelief as Lana walked over and hugged him far too intimately for an innocent birthday guest. When she greeted me, it was with a polite, shallow smile that didn't reach her eyes. Peter ushered her into the seat beside him as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Our friends arrived shortly afterward, and none of them seemed surprised to see her there. Throughout dinner, Peter and Lana dominated the conversation with stories from their past, inside jokes, shared memories, references I couldn't participate in if I tried. Whenever I attempted to shift the discussion towards something neutral, Peter dismissed me lightly. "Don't be so serious, Becky. You're making things weird." The humiliation settled into my stomach as I watched him lean closer to her, laugh louder than usual, and fall into an easy rhythm he never quite had with me in public. And then I saw it, her hand under the table resting on his knee. That was the moment everything crystallized. I wasn't imagining the distance. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't insecure. I was being disrespected, minimized, and gaslit in the middle of a candlelit restaurant filled with witnesses. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I finished my wine, slowly set the glass down, and stood. Peter blinked in surprise when I said quietly, "I'm heading out." He tried to stop me, whispering urgently, "Becky, don't ruin my birthday. Sit down." But I simply replied, "I'm not ruining anything. Enjoy your night." I placed enough cash on the table to cover my portion of the bill and walked out. The moment the cool evening air hit my face, I felt something inside me settle. Not peace exactly, but clarity. When I reached our apartment, I packed a small bag. A few clothes, my laptop essentials. I left the engraved bracelet on the counter with a note that read, "Happy birthday." Then I walked out and didn't look back. Whatever we had, Peter had already thrown away long before I stood up from that dinner table. In the days that followed, the world felt strangely quiet, as if someone had turned down the volume on my entire life. I didn't block Peter immediately, but I muted my notifications so I wouldn't have to watch my phone light up like a siren every 5 minutes. The first night alone at my friend's spare room felt surreal. I kept replaying the dinner, Lana's hand on his knee, Peter's dismissive smile, the casual cruelty wrapped in the word history. I'd held myself together in the moment, but when I lay down on that unfamiliar pillow, my body finally recognized the weight of what had happened. It wasn't just a breakup, it was the collapse of a life I had spent years building piece by piece. Peter's messages escalated quickly. First came annoyance. "Where did you go? You made a scene." Then came irritation. "This is childish. It was just dinner." Then defensiveness. "You're overreacting. Lana and I are friends. Grow up." I didn't answer any of it, not out of spite, but because I genuinely had no words left for him. When you've spent years pouring your emotional energy into someone, the emptiness afterward is disorienting. The silence wasn't revenge, it was self-preservation. By the third day, his tone shifted into something almost panicked. "Becky, I'm worried. Call me. We need to talk. Don't throw everything away over nothing." Nothing. That was the word that finally solidified my decision. If the pain he caused me was nothing, then he didn't deserve access to any part of my inner life anymore. I replied only once, "We're done. I'll reach out when I need to arrange moving my things." That was it. Clean, factual, emotionless. After that, I blocked his number. In the meantime, I tried to reclaim pieces of myself I had given up over the years. I went to work early, took on a new project, and found myself drowning in tasks in a way that felt strangely comforting. Productivity became a shield. My boss noticed my focus and assigned me a major client account, something I'd been quietly hoping for. For the first time in months, maybe years, my accomplishments were mine alone, not shared, not overshadowed by someone else's crisis. Peter's absence in my day-to-day routine felt jarring. I'd gotten used to checking in on him, anticipating his emotional waves, planning our schedules around his preferences. Without that constant mental load, my thoughts felt lighter. I started walking to work again, instead of taking the bus just to feel the morning air. I cooked simple meals at night, the kinds I liked, but avoided because Peter found them boring. I even bought myself a small plant from a corner shop and placed it by the window of my friend's guest room. Something alive, something growing, something mine. A week passed before I unblocked his number again, not to talk, but to settle logistics. His messages had piled up in an overwhelming wall of text. They cycled wildly from regret to defensiveness to guilt-tripping. "Becky, please don't leave like this. You're acting cold. This isn't you." Lana was just trying to be friendly. "Stop twisting things. Call me." Seriously, I ignored them all. I sent a single message asking when I could collect the rest of my things. His response came within minutes, full of wounded tones and evasions, but I held my boundary. Eventually, he agreed to leave the apartment while I packed. Seeing our place again was harder than I expected. Everything looked the same, but it felt hollow without the illusion that had held it together. I boxed up my belongings quickly, my books, my clothes, my favorite mugs, the framed photos I now wished I'd never taken. The only thing I left behind was a sweater of his I used to sleep in. I realized I didn't want anything that reminded me of comforting someone who had never given me the same in return. Not long after that, I signed the lease on a small studio downtown. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a clean slate, a space where no one had ever raised their voice at me, or dismissed my feelings, or compared me to another woman. I arranged the furniture myself, hung up a few prints, and placed that tiny plant from the corner shop on the windowsill. The first night I slept there, the room still smelling like fresh paint and cardboard boxes, I felt something close to peace. Of course, Peter wasn't the only one who tried to get a hold of me. His mother called me unexpectedly one afternoon, her voice sharp with disapproval. She'd always had a way of speaking that made everything sound like a guilt trip wrapped in concern. "Becky, sweetheart," she said. "Peter told me what happened. You shouldn't have walked out like that. They have a long history, you know. You can't just abandon a relationship over an uncomfortable dinner." The irony wasn't lost on me. She was the one I had comforted through her divorce, the one I had reassured countless times when she cried about Peter's father. Now she used history like a weapon against me. I kept my voice calm. "I'm not discussing this. It's between Peter and me." She huffed, muttered something about loyalty, and hung up before I could respond. A day later, Peter's sister sent a long, dramatic text insisting that relationships take forgiveness, as if forgiveness was a tool I owed her brother for free. What none of them understood was that the issue wasn't Lana. It wasn't the dinner. It wasn't even the betrayal alone. It was everything leading up to it, the disregard, the emotional abandonment, the years of quiet sacrifices that went unnoticed until the final crack snapped everything open. As the days went on, the noise from his circle faded, replaced by a surprising and quiet clarity. I realized how heavy the relationship had been, how much of myself I'd given away piece by piece. Without Peter's chaos, my world felt calm in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I started journaling at night, not as therapy homework or some emotional exercise, but simply to unwind. I wrote about the confusion, the grief, the faint anger that came in waves, and the slow, growing sense of freedom that followed. It wasn't linear. Some mornings I woke up bitter. Other days relief washed over me so strongly I felt lighter just breathing. But one thing was certain, I didn't regret leaving. No part of me wanted to go back. Then, weeks later, just as everything around me began to stabilize, I received a message from one of Peter's coworkers, someone I barely knew, someone who wouldn't have reached out without a reason. "Hey, Becky, something happened. You should see what Lana posted." And that was the moment everything shifted again, not backward, but sideways into a story I never saw coming. When I finally opened the message from Peter's coworker, I wasn't expecting much. Maybe Lana had posted some melodramatic quote, some vague, moody caption about heartbreak or betrayal, the kind of thing people do when they want attention without giving away the details. But when I clicked on the link he sent, I realized instantly this wasn't some subtle dig or emotional vent. This was an explosion. Lana had posted a full, blistering expose across her social media accounts. Not one angry paragraph, not one teary rant, multiple posts, screenshots, receipts, a detailed timeline, all of it public. The first post alone was enough to make my heart stop for a moment. It was a screenshot of messages between her and Peter, messages that went back months, well before Peter's birthday dinner, and even before our trip to the coast earlier in the year. Flirtatious comments, pet names, a long thread about how he missed their energy and how being with me felt comfortable but dead. Another message where he told her he didn't know how to break things off with me because Becky's such a good person, she won't see it coming. I sat down slowly on my couch, staring at my phone, scrolling through each message with a mixture of disgust, disbelief, and a strange sense of inevitability. It explained everything, the emotional distance, the defensiveness whenever I mentioned her, the way he had twisted my reactions into jealousy. It was all a script, a rehearsed deflection polished through months of deceit. But the part that shocked me most was that Lana didn't paint herself as a victim. Not entirely. She admitted openly that she'd gotten involved with Peter again, that she'd believed his promises, that she'd thought their history meant they were destined to rekindle what they once had. But when Peter refused to commit to her fully, after stringing her along with manipulation and half-truths, she snapped. One screenshot showed him hyping up the birthday dinner. "Can't wait to see Becky's face when you walk in. This will be epic. History always wins." Another had Lana asking if he planned to end things with me after that night. Peter's reply made my stomach twist. "Eventually. She's predictable. She'll come around." Predictable, a safe choice. Someone he assumed wouldn't fight, wouldn't leave, wouldn't call him out. Every post Lana uploaded chipped away at the version of Peter I had trusted. Friends shared her posts. Coworkers screenshotted them. Strangers commented. People connected the dots quickly, and the story spread through our overlapping social circles like wildfire. By the second day, screenshots were circulating in group chats I wasn't even part of. A few of our mutual friends messaged me, some apologizing for not noticing how bad things had been. Others shocked because Peter had always portrayed himself as the reasonable one. One friend wrote, "We thought you overreacted about the dinner. Now we know we were blind." But the most brutal blow came from Peter's own family. His mother, who always tried to rationalize his behavior, posted a vague but unmistakably angry message about being lied to by someone you raised and enabling adults who refuse to grow up. His sister uploaded a story that simply read, "Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. I'm done." These were people who only weeks before had told me to be more understanding. People who insisted I owed Peter forgiveness. Now they were scrambling to distance themselves from him as fast as possible, his mother even deleting photos of him from her feed. It was a silent but very public condemnation. Work wasn't safe for him either. Peter's reputation at the agency had always been built on his charisma and networking charm. But now with clients and coworkers whispering about infidelity, manipulation, and unprofessional behavior bleeding into public view, everything shifted. According to another coworker, some of Peter's clients expressed discomfort. One even requested a reassignment. Internally, he was placed on a performance review track, which everyone knew was corporate shorthand for "we're preparing to push you out." Meanwhile, I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't comment, didn't react, didn't message Lana or Peter. I simply watched quietly, absorbing the consequences of choices I didn't make. It was strange feeling both vindicated and hollow at the same time. I didn't enjoy his downfall, but I couldn't deny the sense of justice settling into place. He hadn't just hurt me. He'd orchestrated a public humiliation for me. And now the truth of his actions was humiliating him far more thoroughly than anything I could have done. Mutual friends reached out cautiously. "We honestly thought Peter and Lana were just reconnecting platonically," one said. "We had no idea he was cheating. I'm so sorry." Another admitted, "He made you sound controlling. We shouldn't have believed him." I accepted the apologies not because I needed them, but because I felt detached in a way I hadn't before, like I was watching the aftermath from a distance rather than standing in the middle of it. For a while, it seemed like the universe had finally closed the chapter for me. Peter had been exposed. His support system collapsed. His job was unstable. His reputation was scorched. Lana had vanished from social media after her posts went viral, probably realizing she'd unleashed more chaos than she intended. And I was moving forward slowly, quietly, but steadily. But then, as often happens with people who fear losing their sense of control, Peter redirected his humiliation into desperation. His messages shifted from scattered apologies to frantic attempts at reconnecting. First a text, "Becky, can we please talk? I messed up." Then another, "You're the only person who ever understood me." Then Lana twisted everything. She lied. She used me. And when I didn't respond, he started finding new ways to reach me. But that part of the story didn't happen all at once. It built slowly, the same way everything else had built, layer by layer, excuse by excuse, until I found myself at the center of a storm I no longer wanted to acknowledge. What Lana exposed should have been the end of it. But instead, it was the beginning of Peter's unraveling. After Lana's posts tore through his life like a wildfire, Peter disappeared from public view for a while. His social media accounts went silent. His friends stopped mentioning him. The constant noise around his scandal began to die down. For a brief moment, I actually allowed myself to believe the chaos had finally run its course, that he would lick his wounds in private and move on. But people like Peter don't disappear. They regroup. The first message arrived late one night. A simple line, "Becky, please, I need to explain." I stared at it for a moment, then locked my phone without responding. I had nothing left to give that conversation. Whatever he wanted to explain wouldn't erase months of deceit or the way he humiliated me in front of a table full of people. The next day came another message. "You were always the one I should have chosen. Lana manipulated everything." Then, "Can we talk just once? I'm falling apart. I didn't respond to any of them. I had learned the hard way that Peter's apologies were always shaped by whatever consequences he was facing, not by genuine remorse. Soon the text turned into calls. Several missed calls each morning. Voicemails rambling about regret. Nightmares. Panic attacks. How he couldn't sleep without fixing us. I deleted most of them without listening. But one accidentally tapped, played aloud. "Becky, I don't know what to do. Everyone hates me. My family won't pick up. It's like I'm drowning. Please don't abandon me like everyone else." Abandon. A fascinating word choice. People who believe they're entitled to you always frame your absence as abandonment, even when they drove you away. Eventually, he escalated from digital desperation to physical attempts. I stepped out of my studio building one morning to find him leaning against the wall near the entrance, holding a takeout coffee cup like it was some grand offering. He straightened the moment he saw me. "Becky, finally. Just please don't walk away." "I'm heading to work," I said, simply stepping past him. He moved to block my path, but not aggressively, just enough to show he still didn't understand the boundary. "I just want 10 minutes, that's all. You owe me that much." "I don't owe you anything," I replied, my voice steady. "Step aside." Something in my tone must have landed because he moved, but as I walked past, he whispered, "I'm not the villain you think I am." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. 2 days later, he tried a new tactic: sympathy through third parties. His mother left a voicemail dripping with moral superiority. "Becky, this is ridiculous. Peter made mistakes, but you know his history with Lana. He's hurting. You should be helping him heal, not running away. Give him another chance for the sake of everything you two built." I deleted it before she finished. That evening, his sister sent a long text accusing me of punishing him and not acting like the compassionate woman you always claimed to be. She insisted that family means forgiveness. It was almost laughable. They had spent weeks publicly denouncing him after Lana's expose, and now that he needed emotional cushioning, suddenly, I was the designated caregiver again. I didn't respond to her either, but Peter wasn't done. When direct attempts failed, he turned to theatrics. One morning, he showed up outside my office building, pacing near the front doors with 2 coffees in his hands. He looked exhausted, red eyes, unshaven, clothes, wrinkled in a way that suggested several nights of sleeping wherever he collapsed. He rushed toward me the moment he saw me. "Becky, can we please talk? I'm trying here." "Peter," I said firmly, "you need to leave." He shook his head, voice rising. "Why are you doing this? Why are you being cruel?" A security guard stepped between us before I needed to say another word. Peter backed away, raising his hands as if he were the victim in the situation. "I'm just trying to talk to my girlfriend," he insisted. I corrected him immediately. "Ex-girlfriend." The guard escorted him out. Peter looked over his shoulder at me, expression twisted with hurt and anger, an expression that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with losing control. His next messages were no longer apologetic. They were attacks. "Fine. Be heartless. You never cared about me. You're proving Lana right. You're boring and cold. I deserve better than this silence." The irony that he brought Lana into everything again didn't escape me. It was the same pattern as always: affection when he needed something, insults when he didn't get it. I blocked him on every platform: phone, messaging apps, email, socials, even his mother and sister. For the first time in a long time, the silence felt peaceful. Months passed. I focused on my job, on my friends, on piecing together parts of myself I had neglected. I took weekend hikes again. I decorated my studio. I learned how to enjoy solitude without mistaking it for loneliness. Slowly, the edges of the old hurt dulled. I stopped checking if he'd tried to reach me. I stopped wondering what he was doing. Peter became a closed door I never planned to reopen. By the time spring rolled around, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. So when an invitation arrived for my friend Tom's wedding, the same friend who'd introduced Peter and me, I didn't hesitate to RSVP. It felt like a milestone. I wasn't expecting Peter to be there. I certainly wasn't expecting him to approach me. But weddings have a way of pulling ghosts back into the room. When he walked up to me during cocktail hour, I recognized him instantly, even though he looked like a shadow of the man I once knew. He'd lost weight, his eyes carried deep circles, and the confident posture he used to parade around was replaced with something fragile, almost hollow. "Becky," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I set down my drink and followed him to a quieter corner. Not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to end any lingering threads once and for all. He took a deep breath. "I've hit rock bottom. My job is unstable, my family won't speak to me, and Lana." He shook his head. "She ruined my life. She lied, manipulated me. But you were always loyal. You were always stable. I took you for granted. I see that now. Please. Can we start over?" I studied him for a long moment, feeling nothing but clarity. "History matters," I said calmly. "You made that very clear at your birthday dinner." He flinched. "But history doesn't rewrite betrayal," I continued. "It doesn't excuse the way you treated me, and it doesn't erase the fact that I'm happier without you." Peter swallowed hard. "You're being cold." "No," I said, "I'm being honest. He opened his mouth again, but there was nothing left for him to say, nothing that could change the reality we were standing in. "This chapter is closed," I said gently. "Enjoy the wedding." Then I walked away. The weight of the past felt lighter with every step. Behind me, Peter didn't follow. For the first time since all of this began, he finally understood I was gone. In the weeks after Tom's wedding, something inside me finally settled. It wasn't dramatic, and it didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, a steady hum of peace that I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years. For the first time in a long while, my life felt like it belonged fully to me again. I spent more time in my studio apartment, but not out of loneliness. I loved the soft sunlight that came through the window in the mornings, the quiet hum of traffic below, the way my little plant had started sprouting new leaves. I rearranged my furniture not because I needed to, but because it felt good to create a space that reflected the person I was becoming instead of the person I used to be for someone else. There was no clutter of old arguments, no emotional baggage hanging in the corners, no sense of obligation pushing in from all directions, just clean air and freedom. Work continued to flourish. The project I'd taken over months before began gaining traction, and my boss pulled me aside one afternoon to tell me the company wanted to expand the division I was leading. "You've been phenomenal," he said. "It's clear you're operating at a higher level." Hearing praise that wasn't attached to someone else's needs felt almost foreign. I realized how much time I'd spent being the emotional support system in my previous relationship, leaving little room for my own aspirations. Now that space was open, spacious, mine. I also began reconnecting with parts of myself I hadn't realized I'd let go of. I joined a small hiking group and rediscovered the joy of quiet trails and crisp morning air. I started reading again, real reading, not the half-distracted skimming I used to do while waiting for Peter to finish complaining about something. I learned to cook dishes I'd always wanted to try, but avoided because he called them too plain. I even took a spontaneous weekend trip to the coast by myself. Standing on the cliffside, watching waves crash into the rocks, I felt proud not just for surviving what had happened, but for choosing myself every single day afterward. As for Peter, he gradually slipped out of my life like a fading footprint. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine. He eventually lost his job, moved in with a cousin, tried to repair things with his family, but the details felt distant, like gossip about someone I barely remembered. His downfall didn't excite me, and it didn't hurt me either. It was simply irrelevant, the final confirmation that I no longer carried any part of his story. I didn't block out the world to avoid him anymore. I just lived my life so far beyond his orbit that he no longer had a place in it. Sometimes people assume healing is loud, full of triumphant declarations or dramatic acts of revenge. But the truth is, mine was quiet. It was choosing to wake up without checking my phone for emotional emergencies. It was eating dinner without bracing for criticism. It was going entire days without feeling the weight of someone else's mood dictating my own. Healing was the absence of chaos and the presence of myself. Friends noticed the change. "You seem lighter," one of them said during brunch. And she was right. I wasn't burdened anymore. I wasn't trying to salvage a sinking ship or fix someone who didn't want to be fixed. I was simply living and enjoying the ease of my own company. And when I did begin to entertain the idea of dating again, it wasn't out of loneliness. It was out of curiosity, out of wanting to share a life I genuinely enjoyed, not escape a life that suffocated me. I haven't met the right person yet, but for the first time, I'm okay with that. Being alone doesn't feel like a punishment or a pause. It feels like a space. I earned one. I deserve one. I'm becoming better for every day. If there's anything I've learned from all of this, it's that closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It comes from the moment you choose your own peace over someone else's chaos. Walking away quietly isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the loudest, bravest thing you can do. So if you're in a situation where you're doubting yourself, where someone is twisting your instincts or minimizing your hurt, let my story be a reminder you don't need a dramatic confrontation or perfect words. You just need to choose you and keep choosing you even when it feels unfamiliar. I walked away from Peter's world, and everything that came after was better than anything I left behind. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily, honestly, and entirely on my own terms.